Gross.
He's got a minute.
Right, John, haven't heard anything from John. Jerry's out of town.
Jerry's out of town.
Okay. Well, he's still at home, but fortunately, that's not far away.
That's what I found.
I'm driving right now,
Meeting.
he says.
Well, Harrison being Harrison, you know.
Right.
I would think for something like this.
Rebecca, have you heard anything from John about?
Is that his coat there?
Oh, that's mine. I'm sorry.
No, I haven't.
I started to sit there.
Can you turn the heat on there? Okay. All right, let's call this meeting to order, and if we could rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, roll call, Mr. Bray.
Here.
Mrs. Brimmer.
Here.
Mr. Conley.
Here.
Mr. Hall is absent this evening. Mr. McGrath.
Here.
Mr. Nixon, we have not heard from. Mark Kim absent. Harrison Owens.
Here.
Mr. Watson.
Here.
Craig Owens present. We have our city clerk, Rebecca Johnson, city manager, Mike Womack, and our city planner, Mr. Johnson, with us this evening. Folks, if you take a look at your minutes from the January 7th, 2020 meeting, and we need a motion to approve those minutes.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes.
Second.
Have motion and support. Anybody have anything on there that needs to be addressed? Okay, all in favor of approving those minutes, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries, thank you. And then if you turn your attention to our agenda for this evening, I will make the motion that we approve the agenda as it's been presented to us.
Second.
Anybody have anything we need to address? All in favor of approving that agenda, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Public comments. If you would like to talk to us, we'd love to hear from you. So if you could just step over to the podium and tell us what's on your mind. We are all ears.
Good evening. Thanks for listening. My name is Pete Brynsma. I'm the broker of Grand River Realty and Lifecycle Property Management, and I'm addressing something that's happening later on today. It's a tabling of something that happened. I don't see the clear description of it, but I think it's non-conforming uses, and it's related to a 4-unit property that I had for sale on 84 South First Street. I'm also a city commissioner in Grand Rapids, appointed, and I have my meeting tomorrow, so lucky me, 2 nights in a row. Full disclosure, I work in Cedar Springs often for a variety of clients, through management, through buying and selling of real estate. In this case, I'm a fiduciary of Dan Spitzbergen, a local landlord, in the sale of 84 South First Street, and my business was directly impacted by this issue. I read your minutes, and I also live in this world on a daily basis. I have some thoughts from my experience that I like to share. Some heavy issues here. First, affordable housing for Cedar Springs. My company placed a couple of tenants a long time ago, Hazel Werner and Mary Gardner. They are over at 84 South 1st Street, the property in question. Mary is elderly, deaf, and blind. She pays $650 a month for a 2-bedroom, including heat. Their deposit is $400, and I think their rent started out at $400 a long time ago. They smoke in the house. TV's always on, super loud. Where would they go if this property did not exist? There's also a man named Daryl Hudson at 165 North Main Street. He lost his leg to diabetes. He's about 60 years old. He's picked up every morning by his coworkers to go to work. He pays $450 a month for a 1-bedroom. Not sure that he could afford paying for a home on his own, a single-family home specifically. And he's in one of these areas that is in a zone where is a non-conforming use of a multifamily property. So where would these people go if those places weren't there? Lower income people don't necessarily mean lower benefit to society. Doesn't mean they're more dangerous. I read a comment in some past meetings about people in rental properties are more transient. And what happens when you have a permanent neighbor that you wish was more transient? I'm not going to host a talk show anytime soon, but that's my joke of the day. Foot traffic for Cedar Springs. Housing density creates demand for local businesses. I just had dinner down the street at a restaurant and asked the bartender what he thought would impact his business, more or less population density, and he thought that more density would be better for his business. There are fair and affordable housing issues. March 26, 2019, about a year ago, Grand Rapids City Commission voted in favor of 3 amendments loosening zoning laws in favor of increased density. ADUs, duplex conversions of corner lots, and creating an affordable housing density bonus was passed 7-0. Commissioner Sunita Lanier commented, "Affordability is important and displacement has happened for far too long. We have to make decisions that are long-term because we know the impact of today's decisions for the future of this city. I can't make a decision that doesn't include affordability and doesn't include resident voice." I don't think you should either. Average family size in the 1920s was twice what it is today. It makes sense that 2 families are often filling the void of one of those big houses in one single home. Embrace it. Embrace the fact that smaller families are making use of things that were created 100 years ago and making them work today. More density means more economic resilience for the city and a more efficient tax base. And that's kind of how I view it, at least. And then we get to this particular issue of 84 South 1st Street in Cedar Springs. It was built in 1972, 48 years ago, as a 4-family, used continuously. This is not in question. Under Dan Spitzbergen's procurement of our services, my company fixed it up slowly over several years. It was updated, not fancy, but functional and clean to make for a pleasant space to live and to attract the best tenants. I listed this home for sale in the fall of 2019. 4 days on the market, I had 4 offers. We picked the best one. We were clear to close and had a closing date scheduled. The date was December 11, 2019. The underwriter for the buyer's lender turned up something that didn't sit right with the appraisal. And it was after they'd already approved it to close. It was kind of like a double, triple, quadruple check of it. And they called the city manager, and after that conversation, the lender declined to provide financing for the property. The fact that a rebuild letter wouldn't be issued killed the financing, as it will kill the financing of any sale of rental property in Cedar Springs from here forward. Dan Spitzbergen is not only a rental property owner, but he is a business owner on Main Street. He owns the coffee shop, which I'm sure you guys know. He lives in the area. He mows his own lawns. He takes pride in his investments. He and his wife, Betsy, are retired and relying on income from the sale of these properties as their retirement plan. The city of Cedar Springs has sent city inspectors to certify the residents for occupancy. In fact, all of Dan's properties are rental registered and approved. They have never been led to believe before December 2019 that the city would step in the way of their plans. And then finally, I have the Michigan Zoning Enabling Act 110 of 2006, which says a zoning ordinance or zoning decision shall not have the effect of totally prohibiting the establishment of a land use within a local unit of government in the presence of a demonstrated need for that land use. Any questions for me? I do have a letter as well from another realtor that she asked me to drop off to you. And I made a few copies. I'm also aware of, yeah, I'll just stop there. I just think the other person's in the room. All right, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Mr. Brunswick?
Good evening. Again, thank you. I think I've told you before, but thank you for your service on the Planning Commission. It's an important avenue of local government, and I appreciate your time and commitment to our community by serving. My husband, Tim Wolf, and I address you tonight in reference to, again, what I believe Pete said is item number 10, old business, B, non-conforming uses. And I also reference a letter sent to you on 1/27/20. I have a copy enclosed from City Manager Michael Womack regarding, quote, non-conforming status of several buildings, specifically with multifamily buildings, and their inability to be rebuilt following a calamity that would destroy 60% or more, unquote. So we are asking for your consideration to modify this ordinance and to use your city manager, Mr. Womack's recommendation number 2, as he stated in his letter, that reads, again, quote, propose that non-conforming residential use properties could be rebuilt, but not non-conforming commercial properties. So trying to come somewhat prepared and informed, I did speak with 3 of our neighboring communities, and I would like to share that information with you. And while I'm certainly not suggesting just because neighboring communities do it that you need to do it, absolutely not. But I hope you will consider this information as a useful resource. Number 1, Rockford City Manager Thad Beard. The City of Rockford does allow non-conforming structures to be rebuilt using the same design, materials, and use as was there prior to the calamity. Mr. Beard noted the government unit he was at prior to coming to Rockford also used the same wording. And he also stated, and I can quote, the majority of Michigan communities have similar wording allowing rebuilds. Number 2, the Sparta City Manager, Julius Suchi, I'm not sure, Suchi, I spoke with him. The City of Sparta does allow a non-conforming use to be rebuilt as long as it's the same size and same use as was prior to the calamity. Number 3, Greenville City Zoning Director Crystal Hatfield. The City of Greenville does allow a non-conforming use to be rebuilt as long as it's within the same footprint and the same use. It can be smaller, but it can't be bigger, and it has to fit within the footprint. So these official community representatives expressed several reasons why they maintain this ordinance, to include, number 1, maintaining quality and affordable housing for people wanting to live within their community. Number 2, to protect local rental property owners who are trying to provide a variety of housing. And number 3, honoring their governmental mission to provide quality, affordable housing to include multifamily rentals that may be destroyed. None of these governmental representatives expressed any concerns with their ordinances or are currently planning to revise their ordinances. They said they're working. It could work here. Tim and I, as longtime community members, committed to being part of your team, working toward making our community the best it can be, hope you will consider changing the ordinance as suggested by your city manager for the following reasons. Number one, while ordinances and zoning do need to be updated from time to time, new ordinances should never take away the rights of rental residents or rental property owners who have obtained proper permits and followed the law. An ordinance that does not allow a building to be reconstructed following a calamity is wrong. If a calamity should occur, there should be an opportunity to rebuild that same structure and continue using it in the same manner prior to the calamity. Number two, believing that most multifamily buildings are owned by local residents, you would be allowing your local residents to continue serving as a local business owner. Number three, you could continue providing opportunities for many wonderful people who choose to rent due to income, physical abilities, employment flexibility needs, marital status, and many other fair and justifiable reasons to stay here in our town. Number four, multifamily buildings that cannot be rebuilt have the potential to become a real problem for two reasons. One, if we know the property can't be sold, the property owner may be forced into limited upgrades or maintenance, knowing the investment can't be recouped when they try to sell it. Number two, if the property can't be rebuilt, the property owner may not be real quick to address the cleanup. So in summary, and perhaps on an ethical and moral level, we're hopeful that you will always be continue to be a welcoming community to rental residents, rental property owners, as well as owner-occupied property owners. We hope you will acknowledge that people who choose to rent for their own personal reasons deserve to have all the same quality and affordable housing opportunities and be treated with respect as those who are owner-occupied homeowners. We have about 30 properties within the city and have been blessed to be able to provide rental housing over the last 30 years. So I can tell you the far majority of our residents are some of the best people I've ever known. Many have become longtime personal friends. Many have children attending our schools. And believe me, non-owner occupied properties, we do help pay for the schools. They are involved. They volunteer in our community. They work within our community, and they're proud to say this is their community. Some have purchased the homes we've rented to them. Some are widowed, some are terminally ill, some are going to college, some are planning a wedding, but all are worthy of clean and affordable housing. I can accurately state that about 85% of our residents stay more than 5 years, and more than half of those stay more than 10 years. Cedar Springs is their home. Many Cedar Springs past and present rental property owners, such as Dan Spitzbergen, Larry and Audrey Young, Sharon and Bo Nielsen, who I believe built the property in question, Frank Brunsma, Rick and Jody Surdam, Mandy Green, are all law-abiding rental property owners who have invested in our community. The Bremers recently tried to purchase the property, as you heard, but were denied that opportunity because of verbiage on this ordinance. They, like us, share in a common commitment to provide quality, affordable housing for folks. Are rental properties an investment? Sure they are. But there's a lot of options for investments that don't involve as much risk, hard work, or personal interactions as rental properties. We have been forthcoming and transparent to city officials about our rental properties. I believe most Cedar Springs property owners are honest people. Several years ago, when the city initiated a program to register rental properties, we completed and submitted the forms. When the city required rental properties be regularly inspected, we paid the fees and continue to do so today. Our properties have regularly passed those inspections, and we were most often given the longest possible reinspection schedule. Inspectors thanked us for providing quality housing. Now are we going to be punished? We have notified the police department, city officials, and neighbors, asking them to tell us if one of our residents were to cause any kind of problem, and we believe we've addressed those concerns. To my knowledge, we have never had a complaint taken to the city until about 2 years ago, at which time 2 separate residents did provide verbal complaints to Mr. Womack. But I would ask that you please note both of those residents were in the process of being evicted for non-payment in violation of the rental agreement. To our knowledge, neighbors have trusted us to address any issues that may arise. We believe rental properties are actually better controlled than owner-occupied properties. We believe we have achieved a level of quality housing where properties look as good, if not better, than some of the owner-occupied properties next to ours. We are currently working with the code enforcement officer surrounding a legitimate concern with a resident's dog who wanders onto city park property. We won't tolerate that, and we've promised city officials it will be corrected or the resident will be evicted. We firmly believe, like you, in protecting and enhancing our community, but not to the level of this ordinance. What city officials did or didn't do in the past can't be changed. Perhaps sufficient city records were not maintained, but I believe they did the best they could. Also believing city officials and rental property owners have acted in the best interests of our community. In reading Commissioner Conley's comments of last month's minutes, I support his thoughts when he stated, quote, "We are a growing city. It is far easier to set future development zones than to go back and take the randomness of history and force it to conform." He also noted the shortage of housing, which is very accurate and a real problem. We usually have about 30 people on a waiting list. Now you have the opportunity to amend an ordinance assuring fair and reasonable rebuild options following a disaster. Please consider amending the ordinance to match our surrounding communities and most communities in Michigan by allowing a rebuild back to the original structure and use prior to that calamity. In the situation of a calamity, which could involve a great deal of heartache and turmoil, such as displaced residents, loss of personal properties, or maybe even pets, a loss of income, and more, please provide our rental residents and property owners with the assurance their home or apartment can be rebuilt. For rental property owner retirees, such as ourselves, and you heard Dan Spitzbergen, provide us with the assurance our communities can be sold and financed to young entrepreneurs wishing to invest in our community so that they can continue providing quality and affordable housing options to people of all incomes, ages, race, marital status, and physical ability. Let's continue to be a welcoming community that is fair to rental residents and to rental property owners, with an ordinance that is fair and reasonable. And I would ask, in case I miss a future publication or meeting and you don't act on this, if you might be willing to just let me know when you are going to act on it or further discuss it. I know it's on your agenda, but I know you get a lot on your agenda, and I'm not sure what all you'll get to. But I'll try to read the paper, and I'll try and stay in touch. Mike usually tells me. And then I did make copies of everything for your use, and thank you very much again. And then, am I supposed to ask, do you have any questions or anything?
For any member of the public who would like to hand something to the board, could you please hand it to the chairperson?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Anyone else that you'd like to share with us this evening? Not seeing anyone else. So last chance. Okay. Seeing none others, we'll close the public comments at this point. Thank you for sharing those thoughts with us. Planning commissioners, in looking at our agenda, any conflicts of interest or ex parte communications that you need to report tonight? See none on that. We do not have any scheduled public hearings this evening, so we'll move to new business. Letter A, 20 East Church Street. That is on page 9, I believe, is where the documentation starts in your packet. And Mr. Johnson provided a memo for us, so I think that would be a good place to start. Mr. Johnson, if you want to walk us through your January 27th memo on this project.
Would you rather hear from the applicant first or go through my report?
Let's go through yours first.
Well, you have before you a site plan to tear down a existing dental office building / house. It's shown on the site plan there. It's on the corner of Main Street and Church Street. Zone B2, offices, medical offices, dental offices are permitted use in that zoning district. So your job this evening is to review the site plan and go through the standards and decide if it should be approved, denied, or approved with conditions. My report lays out some of the items that are missing. It's the plan itself meets most of our zoning ordinance requirements. In my report, I point out the fact that the current dental office shares parking with the parking lot to the east that's operated and owned by the Methodist Church. And the new office would also have a shared parking agreement with the church. They provided you with that letter sharing it. Our zoning ordinance allows shared parking subject to the approval of the Planning Commission, and those standards for approval are in my report. In my opinion, the shared parking arrangement would meet those standards. One of the things I came across in looking at the parking is that in the B2 zone we have two conflicting sections. One says that office uses that share parking have to have at least 50% on their own property. This parking arrangement does not. They need 19 parking spaces. They only have 6 on their property. So they would not meet that requirement. But the conflicting ordinance says that in the B2 zone, which is our central business district zone, that all of the required parking can be off-site, which makes a lot more sense given the nature of the downtown area. And so if we have two conflicting ordinances like that, it would be my opinion that the requirement that says all the parking can be off-site would in this case be the operative section of the ordinance, and it would be up to the zoning administrator to make that call. I'm just pointing that out for your information. Some of the other things that need to be revised would be the parking along Church Street needs to have a 10-foot parking lot setback. On the south lot line, which is considered the side lot line, that would have to have a 5-foot parking lot setback. So the site plan would have to be adjusted to meet those two setback requirements. They are providing a new sidewalk along Church Street. Regarding sidewalks, our ordinance requires that the sidewalk next to the building be at least 7 feet wide to allow for a parking for the car overhang. Their parking lot is only 6 feet wide, so they have to come up with another 1 foot, which I think they can do by sliding the building closer to Main Street. The building facade requirements, you can see in my report that the materials would be earth tone, brick, wood, native stone, or other highly quality products approved by the city, which opens the door to your discretion. Their site plan shows that the exterior would be horizontal and vertical vinyl siding. I don't know if they brought any elevation drawings, colored elevation drawings, so I don't know what color that is, but you would have to make that decision whether they meet the architectural standards of the ordinance. Same thing with the roof line. They have a little bit different roof line than some of the other buildings around there. You would have to make the decision that it meets basically compatible with the other buildings in the area. And then lighting, our lighting ordinance requires a little bit higher lighting foot candle wise for the barrier-free space. They're a little bit short on that, so we'll have to adjust their lighting plan for that. There really isn't any landscaping required because there's no green belt required because they don't abut any residential property. They don't have 10 parking spaces on site, so they don't have to have any on-site landscaping around the parking lot. Nonetheless, they have provided some new plantings on their landscape plan, and they intend to keep some of the trees that are already on the site. So I think the landscaping plan is acceptable. I've given you a motion to follow here, and you're free to change that at your discretion. Any questions for me?
Doesn't look like.
Okay, thank you.
Right. Did you have a chance to review Mr. Johnson's memo that he just went over? So what do you think about those things that he proposed there?
Sure.
Are those doable?
I think it's doable. Good evening, my name is Don DeGroot. I'm with Excel Engineering. We're the civil engineers on this project, and Kevin Vrugdenhill is here as well from First Company's the construction manager, and Dr. Andy. And if there's any questions relative to any component of the business, I'm sure he can answer that question. We did have conversations with Tim after reviewing the plan, and we can certainly accommodate all the conditions that he is suggesting be conditions of approval. We'll simply lose one parking space to accommodate the 10-foot offset from the street right-of-way and 5 feet from the property line. So that won't be a problem. We've as Tim has summarized well, I guess I won't get into a whole lot of detail other than the home is positioned about where the new parking lot goes, and it's about a 3,200 square foot office building. And like Tim mentioned, we are putting sidewalk along Church Street, and we'll provide enhanced landscaping surrounding the site. The building will be connected to sanitary and water main, public sanitary and water main, and stormwater is managed through catch basins and leaching basins, and we've got some technical component to satisfy your township engineer on, and we're getting some further testing that he asked for, but it's basically 3 leaching basins for that small site, and I think we can manage the technical part of it and satisfying his concern there. So that's a quick summary. I do have an enlarged elevation view. I think that was submitted if you have that on your, but I can flip it if you think that would be helpful.
Yep, and then I'd like you to also address the building materials on the exterior that Mr. Johnson referenced.
The building materials, basically, it's vertical and horizontal vinyl siding at different widths to break up the facades of the various elevation views. So the colors are not yet determined, but we can certainly work with the city on providing the appropriate colors for that.
Okay.
Yeah, one note on that. Kevin Vrugdenhill with First Company's construction manager. Final selection of the materials is to be submitted, obviously with the building plans for building permit. The street side, looking to do like a James Hardy cementitious.
Main Street side?
Main Street side, yep. So it's kind of a blend, and also the back side, so the east and the west side.
Okay.
So a good blend of metal, vinyl, hardy, so.
And then, Mr. Johnson, you mentioned the discrepancy on the roof line. What is the?
Well, your ordinance talks about this, that talks about the building shall possess architectural variety, scale and proportions of existing structures in the area should be considered when reviewing the roof shape and materials. Are the architecture compatible with what's in the surrounding neighborhood? So just looking at the roof line there, it's a little different than the roof lines you might find nearby. So I think I thought it was unusual enough that I would bring it to your attention for you to weigh in on it.
Sure.
Ms. Bremer, you indicated you wanted to say something.
I agreed with Tim. It's unusual for our quaint small town. They just looked really different. Does the applicant have any plans to add any wood or brick or anything like that? Or is it you're still sticking with the aluminum siding?
So the, microphones. So this east elevation, which, faces the back parking lot, you'll see that as you're driving through. That's their main entrance. And those are actually wood beams. So it's, we call it a transitional building between residential and commercial. So that's the intent, is that it'll blend well. So there's hardy siding, wood beams that flow into the inside too. It'll have a wood type soffit also. So
What is Hardee's?
hardy siding is cement board siding, so it's extremely durable.
Okay.
So it's painted or pre-painted, so it stands the test of time compared to cedar siding, which is, I can't say that because that stands the test of time, but doesn't rot as well.
You should be in favor of cedar here.
So I just did a 100-year-old schoolhouse, which was all cedar siding, so.
And you don't have the colors for us?
Correct.
For what it's worth, there is a house, I think, on Johnson Street, which this would match up very well with. I personally like angular contemporary designs. I like it for whatever that's worth.
Without making an aesthetic verdict of any sort on this, I just wanted to reflect the fact that on one side of this building, you've got an Admiral gas station, which doesn't look anything like most residential houses. Across the street, there's a strip mall. There's a church on the other side. It's kind of hard to find one cohesive architectural style that marries those together perfectly.
So I was just up in Gaylord, and for those who not been to Gaylord, they bill themselves as the Alpine Village of Michigan.
Quite familiar with Gaylord, yes.
And they do have a very distinct theming in their downtown. And there are lots of communities, Greenville included, that through their DDA have kind of created a facade improvement that meets a, standard, whatever. I don't see that in Cedar, not in the buildings that currently exist. And there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of eclecticism. They don't necessarily have to flow and match, and everything has to look like Disney World, But you're right, there's gonna be a little variety in that.
If it was 2 blocks north of there, where most of the buildings are up against the street and they have a relatively consistent facade, that would be different. But in that particular area, this is truly transitional in my opinion.
And my remark was just, I'd never seen one like that, except in Gaylord.
Yes.
I think that this design looks very very clean and well built. I think as long as they stick with colors that are not really out there, I have no problem with the design of the building.
And we can have administration approval of.
You don't want me approving colors. I saw my wife at lunch today, and she, without saying hi or I love you, she says, "You don't match."
So we could get administrator's wife's approval.
Right.
I picked my clothing out in front of the meeting, so you guys can talk to my wife, like, for approval.
So the intended colors, we'll say, are a combination of white, gray, wood grain. So we'll say a natural blend is the direction. So we have renderings, but they're not final, so it's right there.
No purple and orange.
No purple, no orange. Maybe a little baby blue for Cedar Springs Dental, but that'll be on the side.
Better be.
Ms. Bremer, do you have something against orange?
No, my countertops at home are orange.
Right, any other questions?
I would like to say that this is one of the cleaner site plans I think we've had at this body in a long time.
Yep.
I thought it was pretty well done, pretty well presented, and even though Mr. Johnson's report was long-ish, I think that was minimal compared to what we've done with some other site plans.
Well, in looking at the proposed motion that Mr. Johnson wrote for us, and since Mr. DeGroot said that they think they're gonna they'll flow with all of those. I think, I don't know that there's a whole lot other for us to consider on this one, right?
Besides perhaps the color scheme, but they seem to be going along a line that seems suitable to
Right.
what we prefer, so.
I'd still prefer if we made it, subject to zoning administration.
Yes.
And of course, Mr. Owens, you and I talking over
Right.
Add that to the.
Yeah, let's put, if we put an item 4 in there about, the colors, being subject to zoning administration approval. So, Ms. Johnson, you have a copy of his motion, right? So, I'll just, make the motion that we just mirror or copy Mr. Johnson's proposed motion that was offered in his memo, but adding a point number 4 down there about the external color selections meeting the zoning administrator's approval.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion on this? Okay, we have a motion to approve that and support. All in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
You guys have a date or time frame in mind yet?
We'll be going in for permit this week, and late March, early April start.
Wonderful. Okay. Thank you.
We'll need you guys to clear out if you want.
If you need to grab your thing over here, feel free. While they're doing that, folks, if you want, I believe it's page 30 in your packet. That would be item B under new business. There's a rezoning application for 112 West Muskegon. And that is currently zoned R1, and the requested rezoning is for B3. Obviously, any rezoning changes are going to require a public hearing, so we won't be able to do that tonight, but we can certainly discuss this and possibly set a date for a public hearing. Quick question for, I don't know, Mr. Johnson or Mr. Womack. You know, that's kind of a smaller lot. I'm wondering about in B3, what kind of setbacks, what can fit on there if that goes, if that's B3?
Yeah, so if I could just address it briefly. This request from Rollins Warehouse came just a day or two late to be added to the overall
Right.
effort that we've been pursuing for 12 months now. So my understanding is that Rollins would like to be able to consider using that for parking in the future. It was not his express desire to actually put an individual business on that property, which is good because I don't think it would work. I haven't actually measured the lot lines or the size or anything, but just looking at it, I don't think it would meet the B3 setback or size requirements. So even if somebody wanted to, they would not be able to put a new individualized B3 business on that property. But there are some other problems too, and that is, if we were to rezone that, I think it might be appropriate to require that property be joined to the larger parcel, so it becomes one parcel. That helps eliminate the possibility of somebody thinking, well, I can just put a new business on this parcel. And also, if that is going to be used for parking, we can all immediately see there might be a problem with a desire to have an exit from that parking area out onto 3rd Street. You're now having commercial traffic exiting onto a residential road. And as we here in Michigan know, from December through February, it gets dark at about 5 o'clock, 4:30 sometimes. And so I don't want people to be parking there, shining their lights right into the single-family residential across the street. So so we'd probably require some kind of green belt or vertical, services that would prevent the headlights from going into the windows of the homes across the street, if that were to occur. But as far as rezoning it, I don't see any issues. There would just be some probably restrictions on the future use of it if it were to be rezoned.
Yes.
In his letter, he said that his intention was to incorporate the properties with this other one.
Right.
Well, intentions are nice, but sometimes we like to require things too.
Yeah, I just, when you said you wasn't sure.
So, we don't necessarily, we can't tie rezoning to the properties being joined, right? So we just have to,
Well, we could, I guess, for future site plan purposes, if he were to submit a site plan for the construction of a parking lot, we could certainly do it at that point.
all right. So do you need us to set a date for a public hearing on that then, is that?
I don't think we necessarily require a motion or anything, but if you could just tell us, if next month works for you, we'll start the ball rolling.
I think, is that, we got enough time with the dates, March 3rd? Good. Okay, so, yep, let's start rolling the ball. All right, moving on to our old business, letter A, going back to, kind of picking up 4288 17 Mile Road, page 34 in your packet is, I believe where that, all that information starts. We have, another memo from Mr. Johnson, from January 30th, that, this was after our last meeting, and we talked about this a little bit more. So, Mr. Johnson, you want to walk us through this memo? And,
Mr. Owens,
yes.
before Mr. Johnson gets started, I would point out that we did receive another newly updated site plan this afternoon.
Okay.
Which obviously we weren't able to review and give notes for. But just based on the conversation that was in the email, it sounds like they attempted to accommodate most of the things. Mr. Johnson, I don't know if you were able to look at it, I did not.
That's all I did was look at it.
One thing, just, I think, we'll maybe get to, there in your, under your summary, number 1E, when you're talking about the sections there, I think that, you got 40-513, and then the next one I think is also supposed to be a 40, but there's a dollar sign there, so.
I saw that today. And I thought, how did that slip by me? Well, thank you for embarrassing me. I appreciate that.
Shift at 4, I got it.
Any other typos you'd like to point out before we get started?
No, that used to be Sherry's thing.
I'm looking.
Okay, this is another site plan. It's proposed out on 17 Mile Road. This is the second time that O'Reilly's has given us a site plan. It's moving better toward meeting our ordinance requirements than the first version. A couple things to point out. They will be applying for to come into the city through the joint agreement with Solon Township, so that will be a condition of approval. When it does come in, if it's approved by the city, it will become in as a highway commercial zoning district, so that's how we reviewed it according to those particular regulations. They want to build a auto parts store on 2.93 acres of land. The store consists of 7,562 square feet. My report points out a couple minor things. One is the front setback is actually 40 feet, the required setback. We need to have elevation drawings. They have not provided that yet, so we don't really know what it's going to look like unless it's going to look like all the other O'Reilly stores that you see in other parts of the county. Sidewalks, they are going to put a sidewalk along 17 Mile Road, which we thank you for that. A couple things I would note is that part of the sidewalk, in order to avoid some of the trees on the property, would not be in the right-of-way. It would be on O'Reilly's property, so we asked that they would provide us with a sidewalk easement that would be open to the public. I also noted that they should show the width of the sidewalk is 5 feet, which they do on their new site plan. And then where the sidewalk crosses the driveway, I'd like them to dip that down and just try to cross at the narrowest point rather than at the right-of-way, which is the widest point of the driveway. So then if you're a pedestrian, you have a little more time to get out of the way of a car, and you have a little more time to see the car, and the driver has a little more time to see you. If you're further back onto the property, you have a little shorter span to walk across, so I think that's just a way to provide a little better measure of safety for drivers and pedestrians there. We do need a lighting plan, and our ordinance is cited there for them to follow. It also has a dollar sign there, so at least I was consistent. Landscaping, they are getting rid of the cottonwood tree out in front. All the other landscaping requirements, in my opinion, meet the ordinance. We need details on the waste container. They do show the location at the south end of the property. We just need the details on the exterior and the dimensions of that. And then ask them to simply label the striped area, which they do on the new plan, as the loading zone. One of the items that we brought to your attention last month was the driveway locations. We were trying to look ahead for the driveway location for this property and the remaining property toward the expressway, trying to come up with a plan that would have no more than 2 driveways, including O'Reilly's, till you get down to I think it's the bank. And so that was reviewed by myself, and I gave you some alternate ideas. We ran that by a traffic engineer at our Fishbeck, Thompson, Carr, and Huber. Their traffic engineer looked at it, and we also asked the road commission to weigh in. And they have, and they're basically saying that O'Reilly's driveway is a good location. The next driveway then would have to go further down to the west and possibly become a shared driveway with another vacant property. So I think that does work out well. Keep in mind, you have site plan approval of any driveway that comes in there, at least the use that is used by that driveway, and the road commission would also weigh in on that. So I think the driveway they show us here is acceptable.
And that's the one directly across from Taco Bell's?
Yes. And then also just to further improve traffic movement between properties, our ordinance would require a parking lot connection. They do show 24-foot wide proposed access easement connecting to the east and the west property lines. They are not going to actually build that all the way to the property line. That would be my preferred option, but you still, if they don't want to do that, we would ask them or require them to provide an agreement to the city that at such time that the either adjacent property develops, that they would complete that access road to connect to the adjacent property, because you'll have site plan approval over that property, and you can require that developer at the time to connect to O'Reilly's. We would need that guarantee in writing from O'Reilly's that they would complete that access drive to connect to either adjacent property when that property develops. Yes?
To the east, isn't that already developed?
It is, but it could be redeveloped at some point in the future. Or they, a lot of things could happen. They may want to connect there, in which case O'Reilly's could connect as well. So we want to have that free flow of access.
Wouldn't it be better to require that that particular access road be built now?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, you have that authority, or the alternative is to require O'Reilly's to agree to build it at such time the adjacent property develops, which may not be for a number of years, but eventually it will.
Would it be possible to require them to extend the easement road to the east now and then provide an easement for the future to the west?
Well, that's what I was talking about. Maybe I didn't make myself clear. To the east is the Stout Building?
Yeah.
And that's already developed.
Yes, it is.
So,
What? Well, I think you can require that the access road be built now, or you can require that they set aside the easement, which is shown on the site plan, but we'll also need that easement agreement. And you could require that at such time that either property develops, that they make that connection, or you could say, build it to the west property line, which is yet to be developed, and leave the one on the east undeveloped, and if that property develops at such time, they would then agree to put theirs in, so.
The two
Other
are
way.
missing it, but the east property is already developed.
Yes.
So we would require them to build a driveway into the east now,
Yes,
but the west, which is undeveloped,
yeah,
Okay.
we would only require an easement, but not the road.
exactly.
Okay. Just wanna make sure we're speaking the same language.
I get what you're saying now, yeah. They, actually, extending it to the west, the undeveloped property, is only a matter of a few feet. It's not that much further, because their parking lot extends almost to that west property line.
Okay.
Are you with the O'Reilly's?
Success.
Okay, but you're representing O'Reilly's project, okay. So, are you getting all this?
I am.
You're doing better than I am, so.
Are you making notes?
Okay, is that understood then, the options here?
Yes.
On that, okay. And then I provided you with another motion for your consideration, along with some conditions that can be modified as you see fit. Any questions?
So, the things that have been updated on the new site plan that we haven't seen are the labeling the sidewalk has been addressed, right? On the new
Yes.
site plan?
Yeah, but I would just say, because I haven't really looked at this with any level of thoroughness, I would just keep the same list that we have here.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
This one?
And then maybe just one thing to pick up on what Mrs. Brimmer mentioned to me before the meeting, and that is if there are any mechanical devices on top of the building, that those would have to be shielded from the street. Our ordinance would require that, so.
Right.
Okay.
When will we see the elevation drawings?
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Sure, well, let's, yeah, do you have some stuff to pass out to us?
Well, I was under the impression you guys already had this, so I apologize. But this is a rendering of the property we did in Holland recently.
I don't think,
Okay,
We don't have that.
I don't think we have the elevation thing, so.
apologize, we'll get this. We don't have the final ones done for this property, but.
So,
that's
Mr. Stout,
basically
hold
what
on, we'll get to you in just a second.
But my name's Jordan Amix, I'm with Success Development. Here to answer any questions you have, go over any conditions. I also was with O'Reilly Auto Parts for 11 years, so I know their program pretty well as well.
Well, I guess the only question that I would have is, based on what Mr. Johnson just, did you get a copy of his
I did.
memo? So your thoughts on that? Are those doable things?
No, 99% of it is doable. The one issue we would have as a developer would not be O'Reilly's who had to put the road in, it would be us. And so putting it where it'd be done at a later date would not work, because we couldn't sell the property. It'd have to be, basically that amount of money would have to be escrowed, to sell the property for something that we don't know when it's gonna happen. So basically, it's you don't know if you're ever gonna use that money, but it's sitting there, you know, in an agreement, so it's kind of I'd say wasted money, but it's definitely not earning you any money. Obviously, that's not your guys' problem, but makes it real tough for us, especially with the issues we've had with the site. You know, some of the issues we had is we've had to raise it up a little higher than I think we were planning on. This would be another $25,000-$30,000 worth of pavement to connect it that we didn't budget for. So that's really our only problem, is if we're required to do this, it might make it tough to do this project.
Ready? Anybody have any questions? Okay.
That was easy.
Mr. Stout? Yeah. Well, his property joins to his.
Well, our concern is a couple. One is the retention pond, where I've seen it was located next to our office, very close to the property line. And also, they had a design of the overflow running into Cedar Creek, which is Cedar Creek is a trout stream. And I'm sure that the DNR is not going to appreciate that. And also, the drain commissioner will be involved in this holding basin that they want to put in. And it'll have to be developed to hold water, running water, runoff in their property. And that's our concern, with that being so close to the road, it can cause a problem with children wanting to go down and play in the water, or maybe go out on the ice, maybe even make an ice skating ring out there. And we don't like it. And we probably aren't gonna stand for it. And the other thing is, and of course they pretty much addressed it, is the service drive along 17-mile road. And if you look on the north side, you can go all the way from Vance Auto to White Creek. You have to wind through, but you don't have to go back out on the highway. And we have a problem with our drive, and we'll probably have to get the county involved in it to redesign something along the passing lane. Because when you're coming out of Cedar Springs, the traffic opens up into 2-lane, and then it narrows down, or doesn't narrow down, but the bridge narrows down. And so when it gets in front of our office, there's no turn lane. We've had a number of fender bender accidents. My wife was one of them that got hit in the back end. And so there has to be something done there. It was our suggestion that we would abandon our drive and move a drive further to the west to alleviate the safety problem. But, it needs to be addressed, and we need to be satisfied. Thank you.
I think the engineer's report would take into effect the water runoff and all that, right?
That's been finalized or not.
I didn't see that in here. Maybe I missed it.
She sent us a copy. It was in our aid,
Oh.
but it was in the email too.
Yeah.
Carlin's obviously.
That's right here.
Right, of course. So, okay. Yes, ma'am.
Those retention ponds, they aren't deep water, are they? I mean, not for any length of time.
This would probably not hold water, most of them don't.
Well, that's what I thought.
They would detain the water, and some of it would soak in the ground, and above a certain point, it would flow into the creek. So I don't know if this is designed, how much water is designed to hold. I haven't seen the engineer's report.
Yeah, these generally don't fill up with water.
No, I didn't think so.
24 hours.
And most of that's gonna infiltrate into the ground. There's an overflow valve in the, possibility that it just can't infiltrate into the ground. But, yeah, it would have to meet, engineer's requirements, which are all based on, what the Eagle requires.
So, do the engineers contact the DNR about these sorts of things? About runoff going into the creek and so forth?
There are county storm drain standards that would address that. These retention ponds are designed to filter out any, contaminants, oil, gasoline that might get washed away from the parking lot. It would settle out into the ground, and I can't guarantee none of it would be washed into the creek, but only if there was an overflow would any of it reach the creek.
It's also designed to cool the temperature of the water, because on a hot summer day, the water that's infiltrating through the parking lot is gonna be hotter than what the creek's gonna be, so it sits in that pond until it cools down, and then it infiltrates through the ground into the creek.
Yes.
I have a question in regards to the retention pond. Does anyone know how many feet it is the Stout Group property line?
Probably close to 25 feet, I'd say.
My concern is that, the level of the property in her backyard to, adjacent to the creek is low, and in the spring or on heavy rains, the creek rises up and fills into the back area of our property. And if this retention pond is only 25 feet away, and if it does seep into the ground, will that create a situation as to where our ground will be more saturated as a result of it seeping into that area, causing potential damage to our buildings?
It's above my pay grade.
Okay.
That's,
That's just something that
yeah, that's,
we would like to, you know, we would like to be concerned about and have addressed because, you know, our property's at risk, especially if it's only 25 feet off of the property line, and you're talking that it, as a rule, won't have water, but should it fill up, it's then going to be saturating the ground, and we already have issues with the creek rising. So, in the spring as well as in the summer on heavy rains, that creek rises up really quick, and that means that pond is going, that retention pond is gonna fill up. If it overflows, or if it saturates the ground even more, that puts our building at risk.
well, that's why we have engineers that look at that. We don't,
No, I'm
you
just,
know.
I'm
we-
addressing.
Right, our engineering reports are a part of the approval process, so like if the engineer came back and said this has to be done, or there's gonna be a problem, then that's,
Are they
that
taking
isn't,
that in consideration, though, our lands and the level of the creek and?
yes, yes.
I would also point out that the creek in this property is downhill and downflow of the Stout property. So any water that's gonna be exiting off this property will be heading away from the Stout property.
Okay,
Right,
that's good
but-
to know.
Do you have something, Mr. Watson?
No, it's,
Okay.
that was addressed.
So, can we, do we need to wait for that other site plan that,
Well, I am just a little concerned that we received a site plan from O'Reilly today. The engineer's report came a couple days late and didn't make it into your packet. We haven't officially seen an elevation. One of our ordinance requirements is that the material that is going to be used, I forget what exactly the standards are, but something about durable and long-lasting. We've heard nothing, as far as I remember, what types of materials they're gonna use. Now, of course, I suspect they're gonna use the same thing they've used everywhere else in, you know, this area, but I haven't heard that, so.
Sure.
Foresight, right?
Okay.
yeah, we have to have that, I mean, your word is, not that we don't doubt you, but, you know, we need that.
It'll be in the plans.
Yep. So, I think probably at this point, it'd be best for us to just table this until we get all of those reports in and we have all the necessary, it's hard for us to make a decision right now, I would say, so. My motion would be that we table this, site plan on 4288 17 Mile until we have the adequate, documentation.
Seconded.
Any discussion on that? Okay. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed, no? Okay, we will table that. All right, non-conforming uses, Mr. Womack's memo to us is on page 46, I believe it is in your packet. So that starts, and I like the I like the wording that he put in there. The planning commission has the unenviable position of trying to decide what to do next.
So despite most of the public leaving, I no longer have my platform to established in 1982. This is nothing new. This is no surprise, or should be no surprise to anybody in this room. And when these property owners and their real estate agents and the banks and their lenders and the underwriters purchase these properties, they should have done their homework to determine whether these properties were non-conforming. And, I mean, it doesn't take a whole lot to look at a map and see it's in the single-family residential district. Oh, it's a quadplex. Is a quadplex permitted in the single-family residential district? They've had 30, 40 years to figure these things out. So I just feel that perhaps we've been unfairly demonized, especially this group of people who've not, I don't know, Ms. Gray may have been on this board.
No.
But nobody was on the board at that time. I certainly wasn't. I was 1 year old at that time. So, you know, we're not dealing with a new law. This is not something that we've passed, and we are in the unenviable position to determine on a policy basis what is best for the city of Cedar Springs. I don't care what Rockford does. I do not care what Greenville does, and I do not care what Sparta does. There are many communities in the state of Michigan that have the same laws that we do, and it is for good reason too. This isn't not just because we want to punish landlords. This is because we want to, as a policy, as the master plan dictates, remove non-conforming uses from these districts. Because back in the day, the good old boys club, the city manager who may have not been paying attention, allowed some of these uses to start, or like similar to before I even came on board, there was 11 months where the city did not have the city manager. What occurred in those 11 months? Was there a code enforcement officer paying attention? Was there a zoning administrator? I don't know. And so sometimes these things pop up like mushrooms, and it is extremely difficult to get rid of them after they've started. Because we hear the statements from the landlords, well, I won't make as much money as I'd like to if I sell it now. That's not a consideration I think personally we should be making determinations on policy levels about. I get it, they're not gonna make as much money as they'd like to, but they should have done their homework when they purchased these properties or when they were built, that they may not be conforming to the district in which they're located. There is nothing wrong with wanting single-family residential homes to exist around other single-family residential homes in a single-family residential home district. There's a reason why we have zoning districts. And so, I could talk all night on this. I don't want to belabor the point. Ultimately, it's a policy issue for this body and for the city council to make. The courts have ruled that this is perfectly acceptable and perfectly legal to do it the way we are doing it right now. We are under zero obligation to help anybody out, change the law so other people can, you know, protect their investments. And frankly, I don't know if these were legally erected at the time and henceforth afterwards became non-conforming, or if they were illegally erected at the time and have been non-conforming the whole time. I honestly don't know. The evidence that we have going back to, I believe, 1982, was that this was always a single-family residential district. It's not like it was multifamily at some point. They put up the quadplex and duplexes, and then later on, the evil city says, oh, well, you know, that we want that to be a single-family home now. So I don't know what happened in the past. The problem we have is now. And so I did present some options previously, and that is the idea that buildings that were purpose-built as a quadplex, which some of them just obviously are, would be able to be rebuilt. And that, I think, would be a nod to the fact that back in the day, the city allowed that, and the city was complicit. There's no way you can put up those buildings and have it be mistaken for a single-family residential home. It just doesn't happen. But on the other hand, you have a number of single-family residential homes which have since been converted to duplexes, triplexes work, quadplexes, and that was certainly not the original intent of those homes. And so I did speak with the city attorney this week. He indicates to me that it's his belief that under the could do a law like that. I'm not aware of any other cities that do a law like that, but again, I don't care what Rockford does, I don't care what Sparta does. And so if this body were to consider something, that is an option. Now, I know that the landlords and the property owners would like us to be able to say, well, you can just keep doing what you've always been doing, and we'll just keep the city the way it's always been, or the way they've made it. The problem with that is, what's the point in having non-conforming uses then? The whole point of a non-conforming use is take the buildings that do not meet the standards of that district and eventually eliminate them. If they burn down, they just can't be rebuilt the old way, they gotta be rebuilt the new way, just single-family residential in this case. And I think you're effectively neutering that policy if you do that. Now, I get why other communities do it, and it's for the same reasons that the landlords are here today, trying to encourage you guys to do the same thing. And that is, it's not politically well received by the landlords to tell them, well, you may not make as much money on the sale of your property because this is what the ordinance says. The locals like to take care of the locals, and I get that, and that's fine, if that's the policy that you guys want to enact. But there's nothing wrong with the way it is, and ultimately it becomes a policy decision about what you guys want to see in the community. If you look at the master plan, as I quoted in here, that part of the city, which is single-family residential, is indicated to be low-density housing. I don't think of multifamily residences as low-density, and neither does the master plan. I believe it says 4 per acre, and this is 4 per quarter acre, or a third of an acre. So I'm open to questions or thoughts. The board may have some.
So what we would do here, though, if we did anything, would just be to make a recommendation to city council, right, for them to,
And I'm not sure we're even at that point yet.
I know, but I mean, that ultimately,
Yeah,
if
so-
we decide to do something,
Yeah, so it is not really your decision to make.
Right.
Yes, you are correct, you would make a recommendation to the city council. Obviously, on an issue like this, where there are people who are interested in it, it's always helpful to the city council to make findings on the record, indicating why you may have chosen one way or another to make a recommendation. But the reason I don't think it's ready yet is because the city attorney and I only just talked about this a couple days ago. I have not drafted any alternative language for you. Now, of course, you guys saw 3 or 4 other ordinances last month. You could very well say, well, we recommend the Greenville model, and take that to the city council, and that's fine. It's your community. But I think it's appropriate to at least allow me the opportunity to come up with the new draft language, see if that maybe works for what your vision is.
Ms. Brewer?
If this is the law right now, why are we even bringing it up?
Well, oftentimes in this world, as you know, there is pressure from people who think, well, I don't like that law and I'd like to see it changed. And that's fine, that's democracy. That doesn't mean we have to do it. There's a lot of people in this world who would like it if I gave them $100 on my wallet, just because. That's not a good reason to do it. So you generally have to look for a good reason to do it. And we did hear some good reasons. Low-cost housing. Higher density is better for renters. That's fine. It doesn't mean you have to do it in this location. The Prairie Run North neighborhood, I believe that's R2 or R3. There's no reason we couldn't allow, as Mr. Dwayne McIntyre has done, install condos up there. That's higher density. We're talking about a traditional side of the city, which has been single-family residential for 150 years. And allowing it to be transformed, which, again, I don't know if these were legally done or illegally done. All I know is that currently, there's a number of multifamily and duplexes that have been installed into the single-family residential districts. So, do we have to do it? No, we certainly don't.
Some of the other things to consider would be, the ordinance says a non-conforming building or structure. And there's non-conforming uses and there's non-conforming buildings. This applies to buildings as well as uses, although the ordinance doesn't say use, it should. So if I have a non non-conforming structure. In other words, my house doesn't meet the setback regulations, and it burns down to more than 60% of its replacement value, I can only rebuild that if I meet the setback. Now, that may not be too onerous, but I really like the house where it was. Now, they can always go to the zoning board of appeals and ask for a variance in order to rebuild it. That possibility remains open to even non-conforming uses. Okay, nothing stops them from asking for a variance. The other thing to consider is the impact that this ordinance and other ordinances in many other communities, if they can't rebuild it, the banks may not lend them the money. That impacts not only people that own rental property, but also impacts the sale of single-family homes that are non-conforming. And if it could be a non-conforming use, or could be a non-conforming structure, the bank may decide, I'm not going to loan the money to this newlywed couple that wants to buy this house because it can't be rebuilt. So that regulation kind of slows down commerce, you might say. And then the other thing I would point out is practicality. If the four-family or the two-family burns down and it's non-conforming use, would the marketplace want to build a single-family house on that same site? Or would the four-unit building sit there in a state of disrepair for many years until the market stepped in and bought it and built another single-family house? So there's a lot of different issues at play here, and there are ordinances throughout Michigan that take a different take on non-conforming buildings and non-conforming uses. There is a real distinction. I think if we were to rewrite our ordinance, we want to make that distinction and maybe decide, as some of Mike's ideas here, that some you would allow to be rebuilt and others you might not. So all that thing kind of play into it, and it's a lot to throw at you. Maybe you want to see some of those pros and cons or different arguments put in writing so you can think about it. Because Mike and I just thrown a bunch of stuff at you tonight that you're going to forget before you walk out the door.
Well, the master plan does support single-family use on the east side, almost entirely, of east side of First. And most of the owners of non-conforming multifamily units live outside the city. They don't live in the city. They don't have to put up with what people do with these people coming and going. Those units do have an impact on the cohesiveness, the stability, and the safety of neighborhoods. And if we're ever to get back to following the master plan as the future land use, it's a long-range vision, but we have to start at some point changing these uses if we're going to get it back to a single-family residential area. We have a lot of rentals. On the end of Oak Street, there's Red Flannel Acres, Meadow Creek, and those, their income is a determining on what the rent is. So some of these things that were provided for us tonight, they don't ring true. We have more rental in Cedar Springs than most communities. I think the percentages, Mike, help me out here. I thought I read 60-40 or something.
I would agree with you. We do have a significant number of rentals.
We do.
But just a counterpoint to a minor extent, I mean, yes, having reasonably priced housing is a laudable goal, but there's certainly nothing wrong with the same goal of the people who own houses to have high-quality neighborhoods with high property values and nice-looking homes, which could be argued those come from home ownership and not home rentals. So there are two sides to the equation. It's not simply, well, everything should be the lowest cost for the people who live there. It's not always, we should use it for the most profitable use.
And there are options for these properties, other uses that you can put in an R1 neighborhood. You can have adult and child care facilities, bed and breakfast, community centers, owned and operated by the public or a nonprofit, churches and schools. So the properties could be sold. I mean, it's not like they're gonna be stuck with them if, you know, if they burn down. And also the city is allowed to purchase properties. So they can eliminate non-conforming uses, excuse me, in that way. And they can remove them, resell the property for a conforming use. And they are also allowed to make a special assessment against a benefit district or be paid from other sources of revenue.
I think you're very optimistic about my budget. I mean, Mr. Johnson does strike a good point, though, although I'm not sure it's entirely relevant today. The real estate market in Cedar Springs and the rest of the Grand Rapids area is extremely hot. And single-family homes simply do not last if they're reasonably priced. So if it were to be burned down and a single-family residential building were to be put up, it would sell. That's not a problem. But the economy's not always going to be hot either. And we cannot be, what's the word, the phrase I'm going for? In the wind. We can't be going with what the popular sentiment at the time is simply because, well, the economy was hot yesterday, but it's not hot today. And we should attempt to at least strike a policy which is ultimately good, both at a moral level and a practical level. I know it's a tall order.
Mr. McGrath, did you?
Yeah, Mr. Womack, you mentioned two things that I wanted some clarification on. Were any of these non-conforming properties made non-conforming, but are designed for their original purpose?
So Mr. Spitzbergen does have a number of properties which were obviously, just based on looking at them, purpose-built as multifamily homes. And those homes are located in single-family residential or single and double-family residential districts only.
Which was true at the time they were built.
Well, and so that's the problem. I don't know. I suspect that they at least had the complicity of the city at that time, but that doesn't make it legal. You can build an illegal structure while the city manager or mayor looks the other way. That doesn't make it legal later on.
Thank you.
Mr. Cullen, you have something?
I lost the thread.
Is there a way to find out
So
in our records?
Yeah, so again, sometimes it's not always easy to find something 40 years on. The city clerk did look through her records, and we did find a zoning map that I believe was 82. So 82, which was in line with when this ordinance was passed, and in that 82 zoning map, it distinctly shows that, at least where this one property is built, was single-family residential the whole time. Now, I believe this building was built in 76 or 78, so I can't speak to what happened 3 or 4 years previous, but, you know, it's been single-family residential since 82, but that's even besides the point. It doesn't matter at this point whether it was legal or illegal non-conforming, it's non-conforming. The only real difference between illegal and legal non-conforming is illegal was never okay. And so theoretically, we could declare it a nuisance and abate it, even today. If it's legal non-conforming, that means it can remain in use until sometime in the future when it were to be burned down or destroyed in calamity. Then it would have to then meet the then current zoning ordinance. At least that's my understanding of the law.
I just think that the landlords need to understand that when you live in an R1 neighborhood and you have, let's see, at least 15 rentals, in fact, 12 right on your own street, and people come and go all the time. They move in, they move out. There isn't that neighborhood cohesiveness. You don't get to know your neighbors. It's just not, it's not good for single-family neighborhoods. So.
Well, I think that until you have a chance to talk to the city attorney a little bit more and give us possible language, I don't know what, I don't know what we can do at this point.
We could certainly make a policy decision at this point if you wanted to, but I think it's probably wise at least to let me take a crack at this as an option. Now, of course, no matter what we do, we're gonna make somebody angry. The only option that's going to be, I think, make everybody happy is going to be the one that says, well, you can do whatever you want, which I don't think is in the ultimate long-term goals of the city. So I would ask that you allow me to take a crack at it, let me take a look and see what maybe I can do to at least meet some of the needs and some of the desires of the landlords at this point.
I think that's what we would like. It's for you to take a crack at it.
But also, I think even if it's a difficult decision, we need to make it. If we're gonna get to the future land use and clean up what has been done in the Old Boys Club in the past. And I think we know the Old Boys Club was alive and well in Cedar Springs.
Was.
For a long time. I said was.
I just want to make the distinction because I'm a law-abiding citizen.
Yeah, I can give you a really good example if you want it. But I won't.
there's a lot of them out there.
I
don't buy them too.
So, Ms. Bremer, one thing else that should be pointed out, in addition to the Old Boys Club, which existed, is that this is an old city. I know of at least one home in particular that was built in the 1860s. And so to later on come and establish lot lines and setbacks and uses and all these things that have existed since the Civil War is not always easy. We know this. And this board has been extremely business friendly. This board has loosened up almost every law we've touched to make it more friendly to the citizens and the businesses. So I'm sure that we will ultimately make the right decision for the long-term policy of the city. I just don't think we'll make everybody happy and we never will.
That would be nice. All right. Item C under old business. We had talked about this a little bit of looking at possibly doing an overlay zone along the White Pine Trail. And Mr. Johnson put together a little bit of kind of some things that we need to consider before we can actually talk about putting something like this in place. There's a lot of things we got to talk about. So we need to give you some feedback, right, on some of these questions in order to be able to go a little bit farther with it. So, do you want to, did you have a chance to look at that memo? Do we want to just start kind of maybe addressing some of the questions on there so that he can come back with something more definitive for us to actually think about enacting?
Are we just gonna take them one at a time or shout out our questions?
Well, so, yeah, so I guess just kind of going down there, item number 2 is I think the first question that we need to, boundaries include the entire distance from West Muskegon to the north city limits. Is that what we're looking for? Or are we just looking for something that's just going through like the downtown zone?
That's what I'd like. It's a smaller one, close to downtown. We want to encourage people to come into the downtown.
That was my thought, was kind of from Muskegon to Maple.
I'd say it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to build these things we've been kind of talking about in like the industrial zone. It just makes more sense for it to be downtown where people are gonna go.
Yep.
Because they will be using it, in the winter and the summer, so, like you mentioned.
And I would, to echo that sentiment, I think that in the future, if the town does extend farther north and our Main Street area continues on that way, then we could look at this in the future and expanding it. But where it is right now, I think that we want to keep it contained to what we would consider the downtown area.
He's got it on that map from, Elm to Church.
Oh, the one I'm looking at kind of goes off the map both directions.
The little lines, the white
Oh,
line
that,
overlay.
the hash mark, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, which is, I mean, I wouldn't mind going up a little bit, just a little bit farther, kind of going Muskegon to Maple.
I wonder if he stopped where he did because there weren't any properties that could be incorporated. I mean, I don't know.
I think past Elm there is mostly just gonna be the parking lot area. I don't think there's actually any room to build a business there.
That's what I was thinking too.
So you start approaching like the fire department, the public library, things like that. So.
Right.
Staging areas there already.
Right. Tim?
I didn't put this map together, I think.
So that map was based off of the original discussion when we first started the rezoning effort.
Okay.
Those were the proposed properties for the White Pine Trail overlay district. You guys can change them, modify them at any time. This is just what was originally proposed, and that was the map based off of that, the original proposal.
So, did you reach a consensus on that?
I think we like that shaded area there that,
Okay.
There's a sliver right between Elm and Cherry. Why isn't that included? There's a small sliver there. Between Elm and Cherry?
that runs north and south.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that a?
I don't know.
Is there a business there?
Is that two-tracky kind of thing that goes behind the
Staging area.
from the staging area back down towards?
I think so.
So that is the little dirt road area that kind of goes behind those properties there. Let's see. I recall in the past, we've had difficulty figuring out who actually owns that property.
So I can just go there and take it over?
No deal.
So when you type it into the Kent County Parcel Viewer, it is owned by no information available. Part of it on the north side is within the city's Elm Street right of way. And then further down, it actually enters upon the DNR property that is the White Pine Trail. And then, yeah. So it's,
Goes all the way to
I
the beach.
suspect that it is probably city right of way and Michigan DNR. It's not really buildable.
Right. Right, the other question in there, properties south of Muskegon Street that are zoned for residential. Do we want to look at including those? So those aren't really
I don't think so.
kind of on your map, but
It's a no?
Just
I don't,
beneath.
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
I think we're saying no on
I
that.
think again, not at this time. Maybe if the city expands in ways that we're not expecting, we could revisit that, but at this point, that doesn't really make sense.
All right, so what about the industrial part that's south of Display Pack? So you go down West Street to get down there. South.
Still rather keep it closer to downtown.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
What we're intending to do, I mean, and again, in the future, maybe there's a reason for a white pine overlay down there, but I think the whatever we would be doing down there would be qualitatively different than what we're doing up at the downtown version.
Okay.
But we wouldn't want the same things to apply if we ever did do that.
Okay. And then what about, and number 3, what about the west side of the trail? Right now, the shading is just on the east side.
I would say yes. My personal opinion.
I almost feel like it depends on what's on the west side, because I do know that going down the trail, there's like different businesses or structures on that side of the trail. I guess it really just depends on what's there, because I'm not entirely sure what's there at the moment.
There's the CS Manufacturing I'd have no problem adding those in. They don't really lend themselves well in their current condition. But maybe with the overlay and a eager investor.
Right.
So I wouldn't be opposed to adding those in.
Yeah,
I don't anticipate them changing, but.
Right, I was just thinking if we put it in on that side, there might be some people that say, you know, maybe they want to sell their property then, or, I mean, it's not gonna hurt anything to put the overlay over there.
I'd agree with that.
I agree. It would make sense for both sides of the White Pine Trail to be in this overlay zone, and then in the future, if someone did sell, that opens up an opportunity for another business to come in that zone.
But would that restrict the businesses that are already there?
No, this is just an overlay over the top of it.
Everything that's zoned, all the uses that are zoned, whatever it's zoned, they can continue to use it for that. This would be in addition to what's there.
I was gonna clarify that point, so it's been clarified, so.
Well, we should, if I missed it while I was in the other room. The point of this is to potentially increase perhaps commercial activities in what is currently an industrial zone. So by creating this overlay and then adding in new commercial activities, we might be able to have these properties focused more towards the trail users. I keep using the example of an ice cream shop or a bicycle shop along the trail. I think that would do extremely well. But currently under the industrial zoning, that's not a permitted use. So if we were to add the overlay, which would increase the number of uses for those properties, you might see that develop in what's otherwise a commercial district. I'm sorry, an industrial district.
Just a point. We don't want to have businesses that will take away from the same businesses on Main Street.
Now, to a certain extent, I think you have to let capitalism rule. If we already have a tea shop on Main Street, I don't think you're gonna see a tea shop open up along the White Pine Trail. But even if you did, if the one on the White Pine Trail were run better, looked better, had better parking and access, and it ultimately did better, it's not our job to protect business that already exists.
Okay.
Keep in mind, one of the questions or bullet points here was that any business in the overlay zone has to be economically viable. And if you're catering just to the trail users, nobody's out there riding the bikes tonight.
No.
Or walking tonight, or in this kind of weather. So it has to be, then that business has to hold itself out to everybody else that could possibly come in the door. So you are marketing to the rest of Cedar Springs and anybody that happens to drive up down that street. So I just want you to keep that in mind, that you are, if you open the door to commercial uses, you're opening the door to all commercial uses that you list here all year round. And then you've got parking issues, you've got the neighbor next door issues, and keep in mind, we just changed the mixed-use district, which this was, which allowed commercial uses. We took those out. Okay, we moved the mixed-use district further to the downtown, and we said, that's where we want the mixed use. We don't necessarily want it along the White Pine Trail. Now we're trying to put some of that back. Does that make, am I right there?
Yeah.
We did that.
Yeah.
Now we're trying to do a little bit of a fix to allow some commercial, and I understand the purpose of it, and that's why I wanted you to come to grips yourself. Why are we doing this? Then you can write regulations to accomplish that goal. And you kind of skipped over that a little bit. I didn't catch, I caught snippets of it. Well, we want to support the downtown. We want to make Cedar Springs a little more marketable. But Rockford's a good example of how successful their trail is. But all those uses that people stop by the river, they also front on Squire Street. And that's where they get most of their business. So that's why those businesses remain viable and can hold themselves out to trail users. But if it was just trail users, those businesses might not be there.
Right.
And that same thing is here. I think you got to keep that in mind, that it's got to be economically viable. And once you do that, you open the door to all year-round commercial uses. So I don't want to put a damper on it, but I just want you to understand you're creating something here. I want you to understand what you're creating and what you're opening the door to.
The counterpoint that I have is that we when we changed from mixed use over to mostly industrial, especially over on the west side there, my vote at the time was contingent upon the fact that we were going to explore a white pine overlay.
Okay.
Because while it looked nice on paper that we could get our industrial all together, I didn't want to preclude that we could ever have uses like this in the future. So, because I knew the value of the trail. So, personally, I'm comfortable with that, with some expansion into the, certainly on the east side, and maybe some expansion into the more industrial side, just to preserve those options near the trail itself.
Yeah, and there's some different buildings on the west side that are kind of maybe marginal. And back when I first started here with Mr. Carter, the paint contractor, he couldn't do what he wanted to do in that mixed-use zone, so we thought, okay, let's change that back. So that's kind of why we're doing this back and forth. We're trying to get the right mix, the right balance. So it's okay to go back and forth, as long as you're comfortable with that.
Okay, so I think we said west side as well.
But then with the west side, just so I'm clear, it would be between Maple and Beach where that's zoned industrial? Is that kind of the boundary there?
I think so.
That property that's zoned industrial, that abuts the trail, parcels only, because there are some industrial parcels that don't abut the trail.
Right.
We don't want to open the door to that, just the parcels that abut the trail. Is that right?
So one finds a unique use that works there, that's economically viable, it isn't necessarily an industrial use that could, I would be okay with that,
Okay.
but only against the trail, in my opinion.
So then I think number 4, we kind of, I think what I heard there is we only want ones that are contiguous to the trail, not things that are a block away.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
Okay, so then the map you have would not, because some of those items on the map, parcels don't abut the trail.
Well, yeah, the one that has the little unknown strip in between there, I mean, I guess I would consider that one abutting the trail, even though it,
Yeah.
there's that right of way in between there, but,
He might be talking about, like,
Right.
look
Yeah.
just down from West Elm,
Right.
there are 2 there. So it would be just the 2 that are closest to the trail?
On West Elm on the south side, there's one that abuts Second Street. That little, you're saying that should be included too?
No.
Okay.
If we're just gonna keep it contiguous with the trail, then it would be just those particular ones that,
Yeah, right, that abuts that unknown parcel.
okay.
Yeah.
So some of those that are slashed aren't gonna be included.
Right.
To be fair though, if you're aware of those, that property there, there's 3 rental houses there. None of them are in good shape. And then there's that building, which I think is Michigan Bell, Michigan Bell, which has, 2 buildings right next door to each other that then block the trail.
Okay.
And they do have the end of Elm Street, which connects to the trail. Not trying to change your mind, I'm just saying that,
No, you're educating me.
yeah, it wouldn't be out of place in my mind to have that be part of the district.
Okay.
It may violate the contiguous rule, but I think it makes sense.
I would agree with Mike, because at that point, we're moving more towards the B2 district anyway. We're abutting on the other side on the B2 district, which has a lot more commercial options. So it ties it together if someone decides to do that, in my opinion.
But it's also, I don't think Michigan Bell is going out of business anytime soon. So I anticipate it probably won't ever change anything, but
Okay, so we'll add that piece in there. Okay. Item 5 is what uses should be allowed in the overlay zone. You could say, we're going to open it up to anything that's allowed in the B2 zone. Or, as I put here, which uses that would logically serve trail users. I threw in alcohol, because in Grand Rapids they have bikers that go out and go from bar to bar. So sit-down restaurants, coffee shop, bakeries, ice cream, similar retail food establishments, sale of packaged food and drinks, products and services such as bicycle parts and accessories and repair. Would you want to let a food truck move in there? What about somebody that just, an industrial use that put a couple of vending machines out there so trail users could see it? Is that okay?
I don't have the list in front of me, but like I think I like your idea of what we allow in B2 that we allow there. Because we wouldn't allow food trucks in B2.
No.
But these other ones that are listed, the sit-down restaurant, coffee shop, bakery, ice cream, that's all B2.
Vending machines outside a building all by themselves, I think that's it.
I'm saying whatever's in B2. I don't think that we have vending machines outside of buildings in B2.
No, but if he's adding things to that, or if you're just leaving it, whatever's.
I was just saying as a starting point, just just say whatever's allowed in B2, put it in this overlay, and then we can look at that and decide, once we get the stuff back, then we can say some of the things we might cross off and say that doesn't make sense next to the trail.
Right, because if one of the reasons is to cater to the trail users, an insurance office may not fit. Travel agency may not fit. Tattoo parlor might fit. There's a lot of things that are allowed in B2 that wouldn't necessarily appeal to a trail user.
I just think that's a good start. Instead of us brainstorming a whole list, just start with kind of what's in downtown right now.
Subtract from B2 rather than build from nothing.
Right.
I agree. It's a nice groundwork, and if we come up with just random ideas that you can add to it as opposed to subtract to it, we can also do things like that.
Right, but go ahead. I think just start with something as opposed to just us sitting here brainstorming what all goes along there.
Well, yeah, you can, in fact, when we bring this back to you, we'll give you a copy of the B2 regs, and you can come prepared to the meeting to cross out what you think doesn't fit.
That won't be necessary because they're gonna do that for their homework, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm taking
right.
a field trip with Squire, so we'll figure that out.
There we go.
No slacking.
Okay, we'll do that. The vending machines doesn't seem like it's a good idea, but I was just thinking, if I was a business owner, and I didn't want to do anything expensive, I could make some money by putting a vending machine out there with a sign that says, come on in, buy a pop, buy a sandwich on a vending machine. Then I don't have to do much. I'm serving the trail users. It isn't doing much for downtown Cedar Springs, but I'm making money at it, so. Where should the permitted uses be? And I think you have to think about that. Do you want new buildings to come in? Because remember, you're opening the door to a lot of B2 uses possibly. Should it only be in existing buildings with existing uses? Or can I build a brand new building just to cater to to have a commercial use? Or do you want it to be part of an existing use that's already there?
I don't like the idea of it being only in existing buildings because that doesn't leave a lot of opportunity for more businesses to come in per se. I like the idea of allowing new buildings, like say on top of existing buildings, because then you can bring in more businesses. Because in the existing buildings, where are you gonna? Is there many places to set up an ice cream shop in these zones? I mean, like right next to the trail.
When you say on top, you mean in addition to?
I should say in addition to. Apologies.
I was envisioning that.
Top is not gonna be height requirements.
I would point out that on a regular basis, when I talk to developers, they say, the buildings that exist in Cedar, they kind of need to be torn down and rebuilt.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at a map right now, and there is a giant parking lot to the north of I hate saying, the other brass building, the Northern Lights building, that could be split off and a new building put up. They have no need for that parking lot. So, yeah, I don't see any reason why we would want to limit that.
Okay, so you're really saying just, in existing buildings, add on to an existing building, you can have a brand new building. So it's kind of just how zoning works anyhow.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So really all, okay. And then the approval process, you might want to, I've given you some options there. How would you prefer to allow these uses to be reviewed? Special land use, or would it be just a site plan? If they're moving into, let's say, the industrial building carves off 2,000 square feet for a sit-down restaurant, and they keep their industrial building use going at the same time, is that a site plan? Is it a special use? Can the zoning administrator approve it?
Well, I don't think we allow two primary uses in one building, right?
Well, we would have to, that's one of my next questions, we would have to change that regulation.
I could just see as somebody sitting down and having a meal in a stamping plant going,
Well, if that's where they want to eat.
that would be an adventurous eat, I think. You know, the way things have worked, based on how this body gave the zoning administrator more power over the changes we made in the last couple of years, I think it's worked out reasonably well, where if it's a building that already exists, simply changing the use of it and not increasing the parking, being able to be administratively approved, that works out well for the developers.
Yeah.
It's a giant pain in my paperwork sometimes, just because I then have to be the bad guy and say, no, you can't put your used car dealership in whatever. But as far as making it easier for developers, it's probably the better course of action, in my opinion. But obviously, expanded with new parking, new buildings, all that kind of stuff.
Site plan review.
I kind of like it the way we've been doing it.
Yep.
When those things happen, when a new use comes in, could you let the planning commission members know what they are? I get questions, what's going in this building and what's going in that, I don't know. Because I know, they used to be Flaunted is going in next to the antique store there.
I've not received a zoning application for that yet.
Oops.
And unfortunately, to a certain extent, I don't feel comfortable making that public knowledge until after it's been approved.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
but I could work to make sure that any approvals I do to communicate that with you.
They own the building and they were there before, so
Yeah,
it's
so
not
it's a-
really a new use.
So it's an L-shaped building, and they currently occupy the back half of it, which is on
Right.
a side street.
Mhm.
And then they've got the two, which is Cookies Collectibles and the, where Dave's Valet Shop used to be.
Yes,
So they're gonna take over Dave's Valet Shop.
Yeah.
As I understand it, which is
Yes.
not submitted to me yet.
hope I didn't put my foot in it.
Well, you could just put that in under correspondence or something if we know.
Would you, I wanted to get an answer to the possibility of whether you would want to allow more than one use per building. And is that a real possibility that could occur?
Can we make that some kind of a, just like a special request or whatever? I wouldn't have a problem with it necessarily. I think that's something we could review. I could see, especially for businesses that are servicing the trail, having two businesses that are different but have sort of an adjacent kind of business plan that they could be in the same building together, and I wouldn't see a problem with that.
Is this legally viable? And then what criteria would we be using to decide when we could and when we couldn't? That'd be my question.
Well, because it's a overlay zone, you can allow two uses or even three in one building if you want to. We, from a development standard perspective, we would have to make sure there's enough parking, for one thing, you know.
I've always had a tenuous grasp on when we can, when we consider multiple uses in a building. It's never been clear to me quite exactly when it's okay to have multiple uses in a building, when it's not okay to have multiple uses in a building. We've had some discussions on that in the past, so that's why I wanted to make sure I knew what I was saying yes or no to before I did it.
Well, we kind of look at, is it under unified control? Do they have a relationship with each other? I mean, whoever thought you get a taco at a marathon station? You know, every day you can now, just drive around, you know, or pizza, you just walk through the door to the restaurant. So those were never thought to be unified, but they kind of are. They serve the gas station traveler. So, you know, a case like this, if they're in an industrial zone, which all of these would be, I can have an industrial use on one side of the building with a separator wall, and on the other vacant area of my shop, I see an opportunity for something, ice cream shop, yogurt shop, maybe bicycle repair. Okay, what's wrong with that? You know, and would you, I guess they'd have to be, you're right, there'd have to be some standards, I suppose, but we're opening the door to those standards right now.
I've always been more flexible, and I felt like there were been uses in the past where that was a problem, and I wasn't always clear on why it was a problem. So that's what I wanted to ascertain now. Is there something different about this than in other cases we had in the past?
Yeah.
But without getting into a whole bunch of detail on it, as long as it's cool, okay, that's what I was looking for.
Well, on a broad view of this whole ordinance, if you're taking the industrial zone and all of a sudden we're saying, and we're going to allow all kinds of commercial uses in there, in the same zoning district, why can't we allow them in the same building? If they're in the same zone, right next to each other, why couldn't they be in the same building, just from a practical standpoint? If they meet the setbacks, the parking, the landscaping, water and sewer, what's wrong with that?
I say so long as they meet the standards they need to meet, I don't really have a problem with more than one use per parcel or building, honestly.
Would we want to require separate entrances and separation within the building of separate uses?
Oh, we certainly wouldn't want
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
factory floor entry to be the,
So the reason I asked that
That's
is
the-
because we were proposed a used car dealership slash barber shop last year. And, while I never did see a site plan for that, I was under the impression that it would be one entrance and that you just have a barber shop on one side of the building and used car dealership on the other.
now I could see a car service shop, barber shop. Go get your hair cut while you're waiting for your oil to get changed.
That would be pretty
That,
cool.
I mean, that would kill two birds with one stone.
I
but-
could get a shave while
But,
I get my
yeah,
car
I
serviced.
don't know.
That'd be dope.
But it would be nice if it had separate entrances, I think. I guess it depends upon again, if it's an industrial, if you have something that's industrial in nature connected to a restaurant, these two uses are not tremendously congruent on their own, so you'd think you'd want to have two different storefronts, two different ways to get in. If you had two commercial uses that were smashed together,
But this is kind of why Mr. Johnson was elaborating on the point. And we gotta keep in mind, there's a difference between primary and secondary uses. Having two primary uses on a property is generally where you get the problems.
okay.
Like his example, having a gas station, the primary use is providing gasoline. The secondary use is providing you soda while you're waiting for whatever. Those are compatible uses, doesn't present problems. But a gasoline place with a barber shop in the middle, well, now you're gonna have hair all over the place, and, you know, that's not sanitary. That, I think, would cause more problems. And I don't see the relationship between cutting your hair and getting gasoline. The entrepreneur in you might see something.
I'm not gonna try, it's late.
I think that just across the board, I think that if there's going to be more than one business, we need to require they have multiple external entrances. I think if they want to connect them together inside, that is maybe a case by case kind of thing. But I'm just thinking about in the future, let's say we have two people that, you know, are playing really nice and they have two businesses together with one entrance. Well, what happens if one person sells and the new person that comes in is not so amicable and does not really want to share that interest anymore? Well, now there is an issue with that. So I think it's just, I think requiring the separate entrances is probably the best route to go with that.
Well, and you're touching upon another point, which I'm not sure if Mr. Johnson got to, is that what about utilities? Now, I anticipate, and I would hope that what we're really talking about is one owner of the property who sublets, and then they can take care of that within whatever their lease agreement is. But from the city's perspective, we do not want to be in a position of providing water to one side, which then gets routed to the other side, and somehow we're responsible for how they use their water. No. Especially if they're two owners instead of one owner and one subletter.
So if a business came into one of the older buildings, do we have the latitude to make improvements on that building?
I guess depends
Ask
on what
them.
you mean by improvements. But there are certain requirements, restaurants have to meet all the requirements of a restaurant.
Okay.
You mean actually
the outside.
repairing the building or putting a new coat of paint on it or new siding? I think we have some of that in the mixed-use zone now. If someone wants to take a house, convert it to an office or a retail, I think our requirements stay, they have to like fix the sidewalk,
Right.
the steps, cracks in the wall. That's pretty minor, but you could do the same thing here, I suppose.
And I will tell you that they do not like that. They, entrepreneurs tend to want to invest very little money sometimes into the upgrade of the building because they spend all their money getting the business off the ground. So we could be not business friendly and require them to make these fixes and changes, which I believe ultimately makes the city better. But it will not be popular with the business owners themselves, as they have told me many times very loudly.
Just asking.
No, I tend to agree with you though. I'd love to have the power and ability to say, not unless you install some trees, not unless you fix the concrete out front. But I think you're gonna make some people angry. Or as Mr. O'Reilly said, well, this might kill our project.
Great. You got enough from us to start working on that?
Yeah, that's a good discussion. We needed some feedback as to how to proceed, so I think I received that tonight. So we'll come back with an ordinance. There'll be some options in there, and again, it's just a draft, so we can play with it and decide how to change it when we get there. So thank you for your attention.
We didn't talk about outdoor seating.
That's on there too. It will be.
It
Yeah.
will be, okay.
Yeah.
All right, under correspondence, there's a lot of classes. Please, if you can afford yourself to those opportunities to take a class, let Ms. Johnson know so you can get signed up for those things, because that would be, it'd be good to get some more learning. Any other correspondence you would share with us?
Just let me know as soon as possible, and then I'll take a moment just to let you guys know that my husband and I are expecting our first child in July.
Oh, congrats.
Oh, yeah.
Congratulations.
Good.
What she's really saying is she's gonna skip it on a loud word.
Come on.
I mean, it's a good excuse.
Find out if it's a boy or girl.
I already know.
Oh.
Ms. Romack, you got any other comments for us? Okay. Planning commissioners, anything else you want to share? Yes, sir.
I just have a question about something we were handed. This Region 8 notes. What is this about exactly? I know it's a calendar of sorts, but who's it for?
Yeah, so we received those from being part of, I believe, the West Michigan Regional Planning Commission, maybe. You know, it's one of those things that just gets sent to the planning commission members, take it forward for it. I attend their meetings, they help us get grants.
Any other comments?
Yes, I'd like to thank Rebecca for getting our packet to us on Tuesday. Like that.
Even though I didn't have the engineer's report.
Hey, I can read that later, but if I get the most of it early, because weekends get really busy, especially this one.
Do you have something?
No, I was just gonna motion to adjourn.
We're not there yet.
Good try though.
All right, we don't have a city council representative here, so we don't have their report. Mr. Johnson, you got anything else for us?
Just a question for you. I gave you 2 site plan reports tonight, and I put the motion in there. And do you like that when I give you a motion to put
Yes.
in? Or would you rather not?
No, because that's really easy, because then we can just,
I don't want to spoon feed you. I want to give you options
No,
to
that's-
change it, but.
Yeah.
I'd like to be-
I like how it gives us the wording we kind of
Yeah.
need to do these things.
Yeah.
The conditions are one thing. but, yeah.
right,
Okay.
yeah,
Just wanted
we
to
like
make sure
that.
I'm on the right track there.
Yep. All right,
Okay, I would like to motion that we adjourn.
I'll second that.
all in favor, aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Thank you, we are adjourned. 9:08 PM.
We were sick last week.
Kind of close there, bud.
I had to go out of town.
Yeah, well, you know,
Where were you at when you were working? Did you get sent like super far or something?
no, it just
My poor wife, though.